Hi, everyone. Welcome to One Startup World, our 2023 summer conference. It is the premier global startup conference dedicated to helping innovative and disruptive startups succeed. It is the perfect platform and forum for startup founders to pitch their ideas, gain valuable insights, and connect with other like-minded entrepreneurs, industry experts, potential investors, and partners, all learning from the best in the business. So with that, let me introduce Max Shapiro. Max is the founder and CEO of People Connect. He is joining us today from San Francisco. And Max is going to give us a talk and a presentation on the state of the economy for the startup world. So Max, let me welcome you. Good morning. Thanks for joining us from California so early. Look forward to your talk and your presentation, and I can join you on the backside once we work our way through, okay?
Sounds good, Glenn. Thank you. Thank you very much. And my pleasure to be here. I am going to be talking about the current economic landscape and how it impacts startups. But before I do, I want to talk a little bit about what I do in my 60-hour work week. 60 hours might sound like a long time, but when you love what you're doing, it doesn't feel like work at all. And that's because what we do is we help early stage startups build great teams. And before that, we help them get funding, because we all know without the funding, it's impossible to build a great team. People Connect is a 23-year-old boutique recruiting firm. What makes us unique is that we find people for any position, any type of tech company at any level, anywhere in the United States. Let me give you an example of what that's all about. About 3 years ago, a friend of mine was helping a cannabis company in Boulder, Colorado, close their A round. In order to get that done, what they had to do was hire a COO, a VP of sales, and an accountant. We filled all three positions: C-suite, VP, individual contributor, and that company went on to close their A round. In a farmer life back in the 70s, I was the chief scout for the San Diego Rockets, and I scouted for the Phoenix Suns and the NBA. And I got paid to go out and watch basketball players play and then come back and talk to management about how good I thought they might be in the NBA. That's what our team does at People Connect today. We are looking for that proverbial needle in the haystack so that we can help our clients add world-class people to their teams. As I said, in order to build great teams, if you're a startup, you have to have funding, and that's where Pitch Force comes in. Every week we run a Pitch Force event. We have 6 companies doing a 4-minute PowerPoint, 4 minutes of questions and answers, and then about 10 or 12 minutes of non-rebuttal feedback from a panel of venture capitalists, if it's companies looking for their A round, a panel of angel investors who are friends of mine, if it's companies looking for their seed or pre-seed. And we also, every third week in our rotation, have a Pitch Force that's just for life science companies. And those companies can be both looking for their seed or their A round. So let's get into the heart of this and talk about what's important to you. And again, we're looking at the current economic landscape and how that impacts startups today. First of all, I'd like to talk about digital transformation, which went crazy during COVID. What we thought would take 10 years for e-commerce and the digital world to accomplish happened in only a year. Market expansion and ongoing global digital transformation is opening up new opportunities for startups. There's increasing adoption of digital technologies, e-commerce platforms, and mobile applications. I can't emphasize enough the importance of leveraging digital tools and strategies to stay competitive in a rapidly evolving global economy. Let's talk about talent, something that I feel very strongly about, and want to let you know what we're seeing as a result of COVID and as a result of where we are today in this recession. Remote workers, virtual workers, digital nomads were terms that we didn't hear before COVID, but they've all facilitated access to a diverse pool of talent for startups. And there are great benefits of remote work arrangements in terms of cost savings, flexibility, and increased productivity. As we know, a lot of companies are changing their mind about this and requiring workers to be in 3 days, 5 days. Some are still fully remote. So it's clearly evolving. After the dot-com bust, I created a model for People Connect that we call employees without paychecks. And we were able to find people, software developers, salespeople, biz dev, product people, who are willing to work without a paycheck for about 3 months until the company closed its seed round. That was about 10% of our work from about 2002 until COVID. But since COVID hit, No one will work for options only. So that's a change. Back in 2021 and into early last year, salaries were going crazy. We placed an executive assistant at $175,000 plus a signing bonus, which is just crazy. Prior to COVID and today, that person would be getting about $120,000. Friend of mine was an in-house recruiter for many years at Amazon. She got an offer last year to move over to Meta, $225,000 plus bonuses and incentives. And that's just for an in-house recruiter. That's a crazy, crazy salary. Those days are gone, which really helps startups because now salaries are back to where they were pre-COVID days. Let's talk about inflation and interest rates and their effects on your startup. As we know, inflation has had significant implications for individuals, businesses, and policymakers. It affects consumer purchasing power, wages, savings, investment, borrowing costs, and the overall stability of the economy. Inflation affects the purchasing power of consumers, the cost of production for businesses, and overall economic stability. So we know all that. So what are the strategies that you need to have in place to mitigate inflation risks? There are things that startups can employ to lessen the impact of inflation. These might include proactive cost management, supply chain optimization, hedging against inflation risk, and pricing strategies that account for inflationary pressures. On the subject of interest rates for startups, higher interest rates can make borrowing more expensive, potentially limiting access to capital. Startups can adopt strategies to navigate changes in interest rates. This might include exploring alternative funding sources rather than angel or VC money, optimizing capital structure, evaluating the cost of debt, and considering the timing of investments. It's important for startups to closely monitor and interest rate trends and adapt their financial strategies accordingly. This may involve working closely with financial advisors, which I highly recommend. If you have a board of advisors, you want to make sure that one of those people is a finance people. And if not, you need to reach out to people that can help you, advise you and counsel you in this area. Staying informed about monetary policy decisions and regularly assessing the impact of inflation and interest rate changes on your business is very, very important. There are opportunities for startups in the current economy. It's not all bad news. Market demand and consumer behavior shifts have led to changes in what consumers are looking for and what they need. The emerging trends, such as increased demand for sustainable and socially responsible products, remote work locations, health and wellness products, and digital experiences are all opportunities for startups. Let's talk about the technological advancements. These present opportunities for startups. Areas such as ChatGPT, which nobody really heard about until about 6 months ago, AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning, ML, blockchain, Internet of Things, IoT, and augmented reality. All of these things create opportunities that startups can leverage to develop innovative products, services, and business models. Startups can disrupt traditional industries through technology-driven solutions. You can also look to collaborate with others and create partnerships, such as partnering with larger companies, industry experts, or technology providers to access resources, knowledge, and market reach to help you scale and succeed. Our government is doing some things that are helpful. The government and regulatory bodies are fostering startup growth through various initiatives, some federal, some state, tax incentives, grants, incubators, accelerators, and regulatory reforms that aim to provide support, funding, and a conducive environment for startups to thrive. Let's talk about competition and market saturation. Startups often face intense competition due to market saturation. If you think back to when Instagram was founded, there were 7 or 8 companies that were trying to become number one for several years in that space. Instagram did it better than everybody else. You need to be the best in your field. Facebook thought that they were, and they bought them for a huge amount of money, and everybody's lived happily ever after since. As we know, there's increased competition for market share and customer attention. But as you see, if you do something really well, there's great opportunities for you. The challenges that startups face in these tough economic times are challenging, but they're not insurmountable. Companies are getting funded. Again, let's talk about talent some more. At People Connect, it's what we say is your greatest challenge once you get funding is to find great people. So it's It's difficult to close your funding round at a reasonable price today. But once you've done that, you've got to take that money and hire great people. At People Connect, we have a saying, without great people, you're not going to build a great company. Let me repeat that. Without great people, you're not going to be able to build a great company. It's pretty simple, but if you think about it, it makes a hell of a lot of sense. It's a major challenge to attract world-class people. I highly recommend working with a professional recruiting firm, whether it's People Connect or somebody else. At People Connect, as I said, we've been helping early stage companies build great teams for 23 years. I recently wrote a paper for LinkedIn called Do It Yourself Recruiting is Penny Wise and Pound Foolish. Doing it yourself can also lead to a lengthy recruitment cycle, multiple interview stages, and decision-making delays, which can result in losing out on top talent to faster moving companies. Plus, and more important, as the founder or CEO, you don't have the time or the experience to recruit as well as the pros who do it for a living. In other words, let the pros who do this for a living do their work. Valuations have come way down and investors are more risk averse than in previous years. If you look at the next slide, you'll see that we're going to compare the seed round investments Q1 22 versus Q1 23. The amount that was invested has come down from 6 billion to 3 billion, a huge drop in just 1 year. And the number of companies funded has gone down from 3,000 to 1,500. Now, if you look at A round, the amount invested has come down from 10 billion to 5 billion. And the number of companies funded has been reduced and dropped precipitously from 450 to 180. So huge changes. And so let's look at where we are. As everyone knows, valuations for startups have come way down since the recession, and there are fewer companies being funded. At the same time, if you've got a good idea, have some traction in the marketplace, and an investable team, it's possible to raise a seed or pre-seed round as well as an A round. It also takes a great deal of perseverance, tenacity, and grit to raise money today versus in years past, and what used to take 2 or 3 months could take 4 or 5 months to get a deal done. It's much harder for early stage startups to get funded, and when they do valuations are lower than they have been in years, but as I said, it is doable. Let me give you an example of a client of ours in the life science space that was presenting at Pitch Force, presented a couple of times. All of the investors liked them, but what they didn't like was they had a $20 million pre-money valuation, which seemed high to everyone. The CEO was a very smart guy, talked to our investors offline, talked to others on his team and other people, and he reduced his pre-money valuation from 20 million to 10 million. As a result, their funding is moving forward. And what he said is, we need money to grow our business, and to wait and try and get money at a 20 million valuation in this market makes no sense at all. Now let's look at some of the ebooks that I've authored in the last year and a half, and talk about those just briefly. One of them is questions that investors want answered before they'll invest, and that's one that I think everybody should look at and pay attention to. There's some great things in there. When you're presenting, you're generally thinking just about yourself, but what you're not realizing is if you're pitching, there's somebody catching, and that catcher wants to know when they're going to make money, how much money it might be, how you're going to exit, and when that might be. Another ebook is titled How to Grow Your Startup Profits by 23% by Hiring the Right Talent, which might sound counterintuitive, but if you have a few minutes to look it over, you'll see why. I've written another ebook called 5 Talent Acquisition Tips to Get Ahead, and a LinkedIn newsletter, which is Do-It-Yourself Team Building is Penny Wise and Pound Foolish, as I've mentioned, as well as another ebook, another newsletter, Taking Your Business to the Next Level. Again, if we can help you in any way with your fundraising or team building, please let us know. You can email me, mshapiro@peopleconnectstaffing.com. And now I would love to see if there are any questions.
Thank you, Max. Great talk. Great set of slides. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Any
much.
questions in chat?
Yeah, I got a couple just observations from just kind of listening through what you said. I think it's really interesting when you combine the people side with the funding side, right? Having your people connect business then kind of side by side or adjacent to pitch for. And the fact that some of the funding is actually, and I guess it makes sense, right? That some of the funding winds up becoming contingent on, okay, we need these quality people. So where are they, right? In your experience, when you see people kind of working through their business models or their business plans, and they get to that team section, how often do they have the person identified, or is it just perhaps the position identified as opposed to the actual person? What's been your experience? Obviously, if they don't, you guys play a big role in that, I'm sure.
Correct, correct. Often we'll see pitches from companies that say they've got 6 or 7 people working there. They may have just 2 or 3 and another 3 who say they'll come on once the funding takes place. Sometimes that comes to fruition, sometimes it doesn't. But generally, it's a founder, it's a co-founder, and then they realize that they need somebody, more experienced than their team offshore that's doing their software development. So they're looking for a CTO, or they need somebody in sales, and whether they need a chief sales officer or a VP of sales or just an SDR, making 75 calls a day. We help fill positions like that.
Okay, terrific. I love I'm a baseball guy, so I love the fact that you mentioned not only pitching but catching, right?
Yes.
Otherwise it's a one-way toss, right? If you don't have somebody catching it and throwing it back on a feedback standpoint, you're not going to get too far for sure. So I thought that's an interesting kind of analogy as you look at it. Some of the you talk about valuations being down and some of the funding being down. One of the phrases you often hear is, they couple it, right? If it was politics, they would put gate at the end, right? But for businesses, sometimes we hear the phrase winter, right? We're in the winter of a given industry.
Yes.
Any particular industries that you see that when you think about those drops that you mentioned, any particular industries come to mind or you've experienced?
No, it's really been across the board. And what I'm hearing is that Q3 and Q4 are going to be a lot better. We all hope that that's true. We're in this crazy recession where unemployment's really low, and it's just bizarre. But a lot of investors are on the sidelines, and once things pick up with the general economy, I think that it's going to be easier for startups to get funded.
Yeah, you keep seeing different projects, right? Because we're past Q2, right? So now you got earnings season has started for the public companies out there. So a lot of people are watching that closely. You had, as you mentioned, you had a labor report last week that while still positive was perhaps not as high as people thought. And so there's a lot of kind of I guess forecasting going on for that. But you talked about inflation and interest rates from a funding standpoint. If somebody was to think about, and you think of traditional debt, I would think those rates are probably much like you hear about the mortgage market now, that's kind of sat, kind of closing people out of opportunities. Would that help on an equity side, you think, or is it a hindrance? What's been your experience so far?
It's really a hindrance, because if people start looking for money in alternative ways other than from VCs, from angels, from family offices, et cetera, that with the interest rates being up, that makes it tougher. But I think the smart startup founders today need to be realistic, and those that are getting funded are realistic. And yes, your pre-money valuation, 2 years ago might have been $9 million. But, if I'm an investor, an angel investor, and I'm looking at 2 or 3 deals that I like, and I like them equally, and I think they're at about the same stage, and 2 of them have a pre-money of 4, that guy or gal at 9 million pre is not going to get funded.
Okay. And how about from your placement experience? Where are you finding these people? Helping building these founding teams and stuff, because I mean, there obviously depends on the industry, I guess, but again, you think about coming out of COVID, right? And I've been at a couple of conferences lately where, the pitches were all on Zoom, and then when we met them for real, it's like, wow, this person's not going to work out.
Yeah, to your question of where we find them, it's a 3-pronged approach. Number one, we do, and first and foremost, we do old-fashioned headhunting. So we're going out to companies that we identify as places where our clients might like to see people from, pardon me, and they are saying, hey, if you could poach somebody from this company, one of our competitors, that would be great. So we reach out to see what kind of interest candidates might have in our client. Number two is, because we've been in business 23 years, we've got a database of over 80,000 people. So we're going to find people there. And then third, we are looking on LinkedIn and Zip or Indeed like everybody else, but we're on 135 different job boards and discussion groups. So from those three sources, we put a list together of about 150 potential candidates. We interview 20 of them via Zoom, and then we introduce our clients to three people. We present three people to them that we think are well qualified. And if the right person isn't in there, we'll continue to source and interview and present until we make a match. We work on a contingency basis. So, we've got to be good at what we do in order to earn our fee.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, when you think about entrepreneurship, startups in general, business plans, pitching and funding, clearly the people element, again, well, more times than not, you may not have the product ready. If it's a service, it's still under development. So really a good portion of the why should we do this or why should we work with you really comes down to the people, people aspect. And at the end of the day, I think we all need to remember that from a relationship standpoint, from an ongoing talent standpoint, that the people that you're connecting with, those people that are being part of your team, even if it's for a short time or if they become a long-term player as well, becomes so crucial. So I think the work you guys are doing in that area is outstanding, because at the end I'm a relationships person. So at the end of the day, these are people that not only in a short term that you may work with them, but they may be part of your team long term. They may then become maybe an investor down the road, and you reconnect with them later. So lots of opportunities, I think, to kind of get in the mix with the companies as well, for sure.
Absolutely.
Well, listen, Max, thank you for joining us today. Excellent talk here. State of the economy for the startup world. You covered lots of topics, whether it's inflation, interest rates, the competition. Always got to keep our eyes out for that, because again, and you talked about one last point. You talked about the salaries now coming back to a pre-COVID, let's say, less of a premium as well. How much of that is it straight salary? Is it a mix of kind of potential stock going forward? What's been your experience?
It's salary has come down and equity has come down too. And when we take on a search, we do a salary survey. So we show our clients what a person, as a VP of product would look to be earning if they were based in New York or Keokuk or Denver, so they can see the differences. And in addition to the salary, it also shows what the equity should be for that position. Okay,
terrific. So a well-informed decision for sure.
Yes.
All right. Well, listen, Max, thanks for joining One Startup World, everybody. Max Shapiro, founder and CEO of People Connect, as well as Pitchfork. Great job.
Thanks, Glenn. It was my pleasure.
See you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.